Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Arnis Luks here at the Crossroads, and I'd like to welcome my two guests from Canada. Welcome, Robert Klinck.
Hi, Arnie. Good to be here again.
No worries. Pleased to have you, Robert. How's the weather?
The weather's been pretty nice today, and the snow is going away quite quickly now.
hmm
Grass is coming through, and it looks as if spring is here to stay.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. Good
That's
news.
always encouraging.
It is. It is. And Wallace Klinck. Welcome, Wallace.
Oh, it's been below zero, but it seems as though now it's on a warming trend. So I think things are improving.
hmm
Now we have to wait and see how long they will endeavor to keep this virus lockdown in place.
Yes, that's right.
Uh,
That's right. We're experiencing the lockdown here. 3 states in Australia, no more than two people are allowed to come together. Even couples are not able to couple. In 3 states. There's an argument going on. I believe that they're sort of iffy and butsy about it. And I know in Britain there was a thing where couples couldn't come together and stay the night. It was okay. This is such a medical martial law. Things are certainly different. Australia's feeling a little bit of rainy weather coming through. We're high teens. And the weather is kind to us. So we're still at variance of 20 degrees, but we're managing the climate variability without a problem. The climate's no longer an issue. Now it's medical. It's medical martial law. And the final treason. And I'll give you the floor, Robert Klinck.
Well, it's certainly a change in our way of living that nobody would have anticipated, well, say before last fall anyway, when the stories of this coming from China started to emerge. But
hmm
it's transforming our whole way of life.
hmm
And the dreadful threat is that when we come out of this period of pandemic, what they're calling pandemic, our way of life is going to be altered forever. I believe that is the plan, because when you look at the information coming out about this pandemic, there are so many contradictions and inconsistencies and
hmm
an absolute inability to understand really what's going on. You have a tremendous number of medical authorities, very well qualified people, and they're all telling slightly different stories.
hmm
And so it just looks like a concocted thing somehow.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I could well be that there's a serious health threat out there,
hmm
but we are not being told the truth about it. There is no doubt. You know, when they're saying that there's a death rate of 3% or 6% or 10% or whatever it is supposed to be in Italy, this is pure nonsense,
hmm
because they don't know the rate of infection. So how in the world can they calculate a death rate, when they don't know how many people have it? And I've even seen doctors who suggested that millions and millions of people might have had it so far,
hmm
and it was so insignificant in their affecting their health that they didn't take any steps to see whether they had it or not.
Yeah.
And actually, some doctors say a big percentage of the population could already have immunity.
That's
But
right.
who knows?
That's
Who
right.
knows?
That's
There's
right.
all these stories. Can't
Yeah.
make any sense of it.
So unprecedented. I'm going to actually cut across to our website just for a second, then I'll give you the floor, Wally. And there's a book here in particular I want to highlight, and that's The Art of War by Sun Tzu. The Art of War. And there's also a saying, I believe it's a motto of the Mossad, the Israeli intelligence, and by way of deception. And it means basically the same thing, that you're unable to actually discern truth from fiction and fabrication. And in my view, the media are doing exactly that. They're actually a source of so many interpretations of what's actually going on. But what is definitely going on is medical martial law. Your thoughts, Wally?
Well, I think there's no doubt about it that fighting a war, especially in the modern age, is probably primarily a question of propaganda rather than military force.
hmm
It's a matter of controlling the thoughts of the population to make them more amenable to whatever policies you're trying to impose upon society.
hmm
And that only makes sense because we are supposedly intellectual beings, and we are affected by the way that our minds are encouraged to go and how to think about things, and to create an attitude of acceptance of certain policies.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to impose policies upon people which infringe upon their traditional freedoms, then obviously you're going to be anxious to use the psychological approach.
Yeah, no, that's right.
It's very powerful.
It is very powerful, and in actual fact, I'm gonna go back to our website again because I want to actually just highlight a couple. Gustave Le Bon, The Crowd. Here it is here under Le Bon, The Crowd. And of course, you've also got Bernays, Edward Bernays, Crystallizing Public Opinion, Engineering of Consent, and Propaganda. These are very, very important titles to help you understand that the science of manipulating public opinion has been developed into a fine art. If you think of the story of this time, we had yesterday, or if you like North America, it's still Sunday, so it's Palm Sunday. And here it was, the crowds were welcoming Jesus into Jerusalem, and they were laying palm trees leaves down for him to ride his donkey across as a welcome hero, as a welcome savior, as if you like the King of Kings. Within a week, the crowd was manipulated to such a frenzy that they insisted on crucifying him. They insisted that that was unacceptable outcome, anything other than crucifying him. And yet the mass murderer, Barabbas, was set free. And that goes to show you the power of influence over the crowd. Now, that was 2,000 years ago, and don't tell me the sophistication hasn't improved. Media is all about manipulation, achieving results, whether it's buying a particular item or it is pursuing a particular policy. Media, propaganda is what that is all about. And of course, the crowd, it goes to show you that this huge level of research and science has gone into. So people are subject to influences they're not even aware of. And of course, in my view, the biggest culprit is the TV. Your thoughts, Robert Klinck?
Well, I've been thinking that, as you mentioned, the art of war and the art of controlling populations to direct them to war involves creating crises or exploiting crises. And I think it's fairly obvious that a succession of crises have been created for our situation. We had that 9/11 event. I really don't know how anybody could accept the official position on that. I've read the commission document, and it is just a laughable thing. So there was a crisis started. Then we had the climate crisis, which is climate change, which seems like a sort of normal thing, but we're supposed to be in a panic about it. And that was a more remote thing, but now they've introduced something that is absolutely immediate, and it is giving them an excuse to do anything they want to the population. And what they're doing involves the standard techniques for dominating people, which are through fear and guilt. And they've got us people terrified of this sickness. You can see it when you come anywhere near somebody on the street. Many people won't even look you in the eye because you are a threat to them. And this disease is regarded as a deadly threat to them. But not only that, but you will not approach those people because you have a sense of guilt that you might actually be a threat to them. So they've got everybody alienated from everybody else, and they're causing, I think, a total social breakdown through the crisis that has been generated. And it's an extraordinary thing. Is it going to end? When is it going to end? They seem to be able to project when it will end. That in itself is quite unbelievable. But they're talking about this going on for many weeks or even months, and some people are talking about it being almost a permanent state of affairs. Whenever another virus emerges, we're going to have to shut down society because it could harm so many people.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting in that, Robert, under the threat of what was originally global warming, which was transposed into climate change, was the Agenda 2030, and of course the objective was to deindustrialize the West, deindustrialize it, and if ever that's happened in a heartbeat, it's over this the justification being the coronavirus. Deindustrialize. We've essentially shut down industry, and what we're doing is we're moving directly into the welfare state. And this is Sovietisation. It's where the welfare state will actually, of course, pay for everything, and where the dickens is it getting all this money from? Now, the big concern I had, and has been historically, was that the state would become so powerful, it would become the mother and the father for everyone, the provider. And of course, if the state is the one who's issuing a payment to you in order for you to buy your food, and it's the only source that you'll get, then of course you are subservient to the state. You are a slave to the state. That's Sovietisation as far as I'm concerned. Your thoughts, Wally Klinck?
Yes, of course, it's the centralization of the control administration of power. And that is quite contrary to our traditional and our proper, in my view of humanity. We are meant to be independent. We're meant to be creative. We're meant to have freedom to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when your security becomes entirely tied up with the state, then you are in a position where you are going to be told what to do.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen it before. You'd think that people would have caught on in the last century. But that's the way it works. And what happens is crises cause gridlock.
Mm.
And gridlock causes paralysis. And when individuals are in a state of paralysis, they're not in a state where they can be creative or that they can be free to be creative.
Mm.
They're only there to be told what to do. And of
Yeah.
course, it's all for the good of humanity, you see.
Mm-hmm.
But it simply is contrary to natural law. It is contrary to life. It's anti-life, basically.
Mm.
And being anti-life, it's simply not compatible with what we are as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for goodness sakes, the animals have more freedom than we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably a lot more freedom.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We are in an open air prison. That's what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a psychological prison primarily because it is made possible to enforce by the way that its techniques have been devised to control human thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Through guilt and through false worship, confidence that where you should be trying to do your own independent thinking, you're willing to give over that creativity to those who have seized social and economic power.
Yeah.
So you see, we've got it's a very. I think that the coronavirus problem or crisis is just another of a series of almost a constant series of crises which somebody is inventing in order to exercise increasing control over society, incremental, step by step, but always growing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's very dangerous, and it's the end of life as being something of a meaningful nature, because it deprives you of being a living being in the true sense of having intellect, having the ability to think, the ability to act upon moral or ethical principles. And you become simply somebody for the state to push around and to direct and ultimately to very severely punish. By the way, in Alberta now, I think just the other day, they have changed the gathering number from 15 to 2, believe it or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in Australia, in 3 states, the gathering number is now 2. In our state, South Australia, it's 10. I would point out that in this state of fear, if you ever actually are placed in a situation that is quite hostile and threatening to you, there are three things you can do. One is to take flight, to run away. The other is to fight. The third is to actually stand still, to actually stop where you are and freeze. And that's, in my view, that's what society is doing. It's stopping and it's freezing. Martial
Mhm.
law is being imposed on the whole world. They can't go anywhere because the whole world is having martial law imposed on it.
Yes.
We can't go to the free world, to the free West. We can't leave the Soviet Union to do that. There's nowhere to go. So we've got a choice. We either freeze and do nothing, or we choose to do something different and actually resist what's going on. And that to me is the key. Sun Yat-sen, in his Art of War, most of the tactics that he highlights in that particular book is all about confusing the enemy. It's all about deceiving. It's
Mhm.
all about, if I want them to think that I'm walking or marching while I'm resting, I want them to think that I'm resting while I'm marching. It's all about deception. So when we see media that presents coffins for Italy, and it says, look at the coffins for Italy. They're taken from a shipwreck that happened 2 years ago. But the coffins are depicting that this is actually what's going on. And the army trucks carrying body bags. Now, this is before the actual death rate was anything like it was now. It was a pure fabrication. So the media is actually herding us in. They're using psychological advantage over us, and of course we're unprepared for it. We haven't actually taken into account that the media is so encompassing over us. It really is inviting, if you like, the adulteress into your own home. That's I can't describe it as anything less than that. That's what it is. We're losing we're losing sight of who we are, what we are, and the reason for life. And the thing is that this holy season is, what is the reason for life? What is it? It's to be free. It's to be free to worship. It's to be free to enjoy our life and enjoy it with our neighbour. And the purpose of government is to serve the individual, whereas all of this is thrown on its head. The purpose of government is domination over the individual, domination over every individual. That's their thinking. And of course, it's the antithesis, if you like, or the Antichrist. Your thoughts, Robert?
Well, it is the Antichrist because it's built on lies. And one of the lies that is being reported in a number of places now, I've read it in Britain, I've read it about Italy, I've read it of the United States, and that is that any mortality, if a body can be found to have coronavirus in it, will be registered as the result of coronavirus. And most of the mortalities are of elderly people. In Italy, the average age was about 79, apparently. I was looking at an official site today,
Mm-hmm.
and they were talking about the doctors. Well, there are about 61 doctors, apparently, who've died now in Italy. But they're all old men, and
Mm-hmm.
many of them would be retired who are not even in contact with patients anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So if a doctor dies, they attribute his death to coronavirus. It's fraud.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was another thing in there. They said that they had done a study of 355 people who died, and of those, 3 did not have serious pre-existing health conditions.
Mm.
So all this, there's this. Mark Twain came up with the expression: there are lies, damned lies, and statistics, and we're seeing a criminal manipulation of statistics now. So
Yeah.
we can't see clearly what's going on.
Yeah.
It's all being exaggerated and dramatized. Uh, who knows what the real threat is? You can't believe the information you're getting.
Yeah.
And I have a contact in China, by the way. And in China, the crisis was supposed to have passed. And the people, all of whom pretty well were wearing masks when they went out, which was not very often. Well, they got rid of the masks. But right now, the masks are coming back.
Mm.
So are we going to have a succession of threats like this going on and on and on, and we're never going to leave our houses again. That seems to be a real threat right now.
Yeah, yeah. I noted
Very
yesterday.
disturbing.
There was some video. Now, what would you call it? Just cutouts. Bill Gates in particular, and they're talking about a certificate of vaccination to accompany you that you won't be allowed to work, you won't be allowed to leave your home unless you've had a particular vaccine. Whether you've got antibodies in your system or not makes no difference. So in other words, if you've had coronavirus and you've processed it and your immune system was able to just belt the living daylights out of it and you're okay, and your immune system is in satisfactory for life because you've processed that particular virus, it makes no difference. He's insisting that you have to have a vaccination, and of course, who's the owner of the patent for the vaccine? Who just happens to own it? It's just the same bloke. So you've got to start taking a step back from the situation. I don't believe the threat. I mean, I ask myself, who do I know that's got coronavirus? How many? Well, I'm sorry, I don't know any. Who's died that you know? Well, again, I don't know any. Within our immediate family and extended family, I'm not aware of any that are sick or any that are dying. And I think in Australia, the numbers are still in two digits. It's not a lot at all, and it's certainly nothing like historical seasonal flu deaths. Nothing like it. And yet here we are, we've lunched our economy, we've shut it down, and the government is insisting that through a sort of a universal basic income, it's going to protect everyone. Where is this money coming from? I mean, it's coming from private money merchants. And so all they're doing is indebting us as a nation further and further into private banks. It's a ridiculous state of affairs, but that's where we're heading. That's where we're heading, essentially martial law, Bolshevizing us and indebting us so that we won't come out of this. It really is such a very, very serious threat. And we've got to take a step back and start observing and looking. And of course, for those who are convinced that it's real, the statistics won't change your point of view. That's quite clear. For those who are convinced that their government wouldn't lie, their government wouldn't deceive, that everything that comes from the media is truthful, of course, this program won't suit you at all. But the fact is, this is what is going on. And so it's only for those that can actually hear us. It's only for those that can actually start to process the information that we've put in front of you, that the tool, the weapon that's being used against us to impose martial law is called coronavirus. It could have just as easily been 9/11. It could have just as easily been the Y2K, but the thing, or climate. All of these things were put in place to try, and they kept on trialing it, trialing it, trialing it. Emergency after emergency after emergency. We've had 20 years of it, of these crises, in order to see if they could get the population to move. And now they've got us to move, and unfortunately, it's going to take a lot of resistance. It's going to take a lot of effort on the part of those that have ears to hear. Your thoughts, Wallace?
Well, of course, political and economic planning in Britain, which is kind of a wing of the Fabian socialist movement, which believes in an administered society, not in a free society, but a highly administered society, made the comment, I think, that no crisis should be overlooked as an advantage or an opportunity to impose certain restrictions upon society. And I think that we're having that. There's a group of people who pose as intellectuals and who seem to be able to convince a lot of society that they are to be taken seriously in with regard to many of these restrictions that have been put on society and which continue to be put on society. And it's just black magic. It's like the witch doctor. The witch doctor can kill through his power to affect his victim. People have died because of the psychological influence of the witch doctor.
Yeah.
They know somehow instinctively how to literally take over other people's minds and to instill fear within them. So it's It's a really diabolical sort of thing, and it's a tragic thing that human beings are so. It's a tragic thing if somebody tells you that there's a cliff ahead, and there is a cliff ahead, and you just keep walking right over it. Yes, but so many things are put forward in a vague way and in a deceptive way, which have no bearing on reality or whatever, and people will fall victim to that quite easily. It's really dangerous. So yes, but you see, again, it gets back to this idea of is might right? Now, might can be described within different parameters. It might be just right, straight physical violence, or it might be psychological violence. And it's debatable whether the psychological effects are not even greater than the physical. I guess if you know you're being attacked physically, you know you're being attacked physically, but psychologically, very frequently, you don't really have any idea of what's being done.
Yeah.
You fall victim to a pattern of thought, which is instilled or impregnated in your mind. And that's much harder for a lot of people to deal with, because a lot of people are not highly sophisticated. A lot of people are not, they're just not inclined to deal with abstractions and things like that. They're more inclined to respond to something direct that they can see, that they can smell, they can touch, they can feel, something that is closer to the real world around them.
Yeah.
And yet the other is terribly, and the communists, of course, put a great deal of stress upon propaganda. They also put much stress upon outright physical oppression.
Yeah.
But they also really concentrated on how to literally take over and dominate the human mind, because it's always a lot easier to control people if they fall into it by acquiescence than if they have to be shoved into it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing this domination of the human mind through media, through fear, that the whole world is actually herded into a corner, and the corner is called Bolshevism or totalitarianism. We're at the 27-minute mark. It's been a very interesting forum. My apologies for the bandwidth. That's why Wallace is so bright and pixelated. We have bandwidth issues today because I'm guessing that so many people are home. They're not at work, and so the internet's getting hammered. Anyway, we'll keep talking. Your thoughts and closing comments, please, Robert Klinck.
Well, this business of fear is certainly what lies behind the success of the program to intimidate everybody into going into their homes and hiding out there, sheltering in place, as the Americans say. It's an extraordinary thing. But in this situation, you wonder how you can resist, because they're using this group psychology, and many people actually are cooperating in this because they are convinced they're doing a good thing. They're being socially responsible individuals. And there's a lot of snitching going on. People will phone authorities and say that their neighbors are doing something that's outside the parameters that have been laid down. So it's a fearful situation. And there's the basic fear of catching this deadly pandemic, apparently this disease. I don't know how deadly it is. It seems as if a great percentage of the people who have it don't have any symptoms at all. So it's a bit peculiar. But I really think that the fact that religion has failed to such a great extent in our societies, and religion was the basis of our courage before. Because at least in the Christian religion, Christ came that you should have life and have it everlasting. I'm not sure what that means. Personally, I believe it. I don't know how to interpret it. I don't know what that means. I can't conceive of what form it would take. But if I'm afraid of death, then somebody who threatens me with that can control me absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's something that people should think about, because we need to have the ability to resist situations like this that are being imposed upon us, or there'll be no point in living, because our lives will be so circumscribed and so dull and so full of fear that they'll be without any pleasure. We're supposed to be having life abundant. We're not supposed to be cowering in our homes.
Yeah.
Fearful that the police are going to show up someday.
Yeah. No, I
If I
agree.
might make just one comment, I think I was reading quite recently. I understand that 2,000 years ago, the Pharisees, the ancient Pharisees, actually had, I think it was some 430 vain oblations, daily oblations, which they imposed upon the people, or to try to impose upon the people, yeah. And that shows the type of control they sought over the people themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what we're moving into. It's a form of Phariseeism because it's control.
Now, Christians are supposed to be living by the Spirit, not by the law. Yeah. The law has been superseded. Jesus said he came to fulfill the law. He fulfilled the law, but that doesn't mean he was imposing the law. That means he was the completion of it in the form of a liberation from the strictures of it.
Yeah.
That's the significance of Christianity.
That's right. Life more abundant. Of course, the scriptures are there to be read and reread, and they are an uplifting source, if you like. They do actually lift your spirit, and they lift it out of the quagmire that you can find yourself in. And it's in the scriptures. It says, "Perfect love cast out fear." Perfect love cast out fear.
Not perfect law, right. Perfect love. Yeah.
Yeah. And in this love, this relationship, it's the relationship with your fellow man, with your husband, your wife, your child. This form of love, of mutual love and cooperation. And we're not seeing that, whether it's snitches, whether it's governments imposing their will over you, whether it's financial slavery. None of these are acts of love. They're actually acts of...
Certainly the financial system is an expression of salvation through works, not salvation through love.
Yeah. As if the financial system actually can determine a spiritual end in itself, and of course it can't.
We've been Phariseized. We've been the return. I think Eric Butler called it the return of the Pharisee.
Yeah, yeah.
But probably was never completely absent.
And perfect love is inconsistent with narcissism, and every effort has been made to create a narcissistic society.
That's right.
With all this Facebook stuff and so on. And the kids are absorbed by it. They haven't been given any bigger view of their position in creation.
No, nor the challenges of this life that are before them. It's all instant porridge, and it is an undoing. And I guess in a lot of ways, my personal experience is that I've gone through some trialing times, some testing times. It hasn't been pretty, and the scars on my face show it. Their stories, their experiences, and the grey hair, again the same. Their experiences, their life lessons. And it's taken me a lifetime to come to the conclusions I've come to now. And as a young bloke, I knew nothing, knew very little, and was self-absorbed. But over time, that matured because of children, because of family, because of giving. You're giving up yourself for others, and in that, and to me, that's such a profound message, if you like. The Christian message is actually one of service. It's of giving up yourself in the service of others, and to me, that was clearly demonstrated with Christ himself, that yes, he knew what Jerusalem was calling him for. He knew that it, in the end, was the cross, was crucifixion, was torture and murder. But he still went and faced it because he gave himself up for the many. And that many
Man hath no greater love than to give his life for his fellow.
That's right. That's right. And that to me is an expression of love. And it's an opportunity to actually reconsider the Christian message. Why is it so profound? Is it where the power, the Darwinism, emanates from the survival of the fittest, the Jordan Peterson, the dominance hierarchy? Or is it where, in a position of service, you actually become the greatest amongst all, the slave? These are the Christian principles. It's not one of power; it's one of service. So it
Whose
is
whose
a good.
service whose service is perfect
Perfect
freedom.
freedom.
Right?
His service is perfect freedom. That's right. You actually lose all of those crutches that you carry by, if you like, disciplining yourself to serve. So it's a beautiful Easter message as we're in Holy Week and we're walking towards the crucifixion, the most holiest of seasons, where the world was saved through the the serving of one, the serving unto death. What a profound story! What a profound illustration! And here it is: the world itself has turned away, and it must turn back. It must turn around, completely turn around in this, as I say, this most holy of seasons. Thank you so much, Robert and Wally Klinck.
You're welcome,
Thank you,
Arnie.
Arnie.